Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I am joined by the amazing Larry of Chillyboy Productions. How you doing today, Larry?
Good. Hello. Thank you so much for inviting me on today.
No, it's an absolute honor to have you on here. But before we talk about why you're here, Larry, I would like for the people that don't know you to get to know you a little bit. You are a queer Latinx film reviewer for Chillyboy Productions. So you've been doing YouTube for a while now. What got you started in wanting to do YouTube full time?
Yeah, so I basically wanted to start a channel because I was like, you know what? I see like everything anyway. I'm at the movie theater every weekend pretty much. Why not get online and talk about it?
Right.
And that's kind of where it stemmed from. I've always been a big movie person. It actually kind of comes from my grandma, who also is a horror movie fanatic. So I think that's where my love of horror comes from, is her. But she's the one who really got me into film in general. So that, you know what, if you're going to be watching them, just go get online, talk about it, make a channel.
Right. And it's obviously done a lot for you because you do more than just that. You also have Cinemania World Podcast, the CinemaSnarks podcast, and you're currently a member of the Denver Film Society and the International Film Society. So you've covered the Denver Film Festival for the last 5 years. What's it like when you go out and you're actually in person covering these festivals?
Yeah, the film festivals are always a double-edged sword a little bit, I think, especially in person, because we had COVID, so it was a little fun doing all the online stuff. But it's always a blast getting to see all of these movies. Oftentimes you're seeing movies, sometimes before they even have distribution at that point, or they're still trying to find their footing. So it's a weird experience when you watch something and then like a year and a half, almost 2 years later down the line, it finally like gets released, and you're like, oh hey, I
Yes, I
remember
forgot about
seeing
this one.
that. Yeah, okay. Um, it's also a little bit exhausting because you're cramming like 10, 15 movies in, maybe even more. Some people get real crazy with these film festivals.
Yes.
But you're cramming all that into like a week and a half, 2 week span. So particularly if you're like have a day job or something, and then you're basically like around the clock for 2 weeks straight.
Yeah. And it takes that's what a lot of people don't get. They're like, oh, you get to sit around and watch movies. It's not like that. Very rarely do we get to just sit around and watch a movie for fun now. Every time we're watching a movie, we have timestamps up. We have, we're pen in our hand or phone in our hand, so we're taking notes and critiquing everything. It is nice sometimes when you can just sit around and shut your brain off and just watch a movie for fun. So, well, you do these movie reviews, but on top of that, you do reactions to movies and TV series and cover Comic Cons like San Diego, and you cosplay as well. So, you talk about all the stuff with the film festivals. You're doing a lot more than just that. So, how are you able to keep your sanity while you're trying to juggle all these different things you're doing?
Yeah, a lot of times, especially when I do like a new cosplay, I'm pretty terrible sometimes with time management. I have all these ideas, and then when it comes down to like the week before the Comic Con, I'm like in my room, just a complete disaster. Hot glue, like cut up fabrics and stuff everywhere. It's a mess. Trying to put together a wig or something crazy. But yeah, sometimes it's a little bit much, and I don't know, just I guess when you like it, you make time for it, and you find a way to do it when it's something you enjoy. Every now and then I'd like, oh, I wish I could have gotten this cosplay done for the con, but it's always nice when you do it for a while because you kind of at least build up maybe like 3 or 4 reliable ones. So it's like, okay, I don't have anything really, but I still want to do it, so let me grab this one out of the bag and kind of dust it off.
Right.
But yeah, I'm when you're a nerd, I guess it's easy to get like caught up in everything. If you're the movie nerd, Comic Con just kind of comes natural, and it's nice to finally be at a point where I'm like getting accepted as press to these things, so it's not like a complete wallet drain as well. Going to all of these things, it's a little bit because you still got to pay for like your hotel and flight and stuff if
Oh
you're doing
yeah.
Comic Con, San Diego, and all that. But yeah.
Well, and it's also that you're at that point now, like you said, to where you're being recognized as press, and it's showing that you're doing the right things.
Yeah.
Um, And the best thing about this, guys, is doing the YouTube channel, doing the podcast. You guys don't have to go far to become a part of that family because I have all of Larry's links right down in the description. So make sure you are following on social media. Make sure you're subscribing on the YouTube channel, subscribing to the podcast. That way you can become a part of that family and you can become part of that review family. And also, it's always fun to be able to learn what people have coming up in the future, especially with social media. You can check out all of the cosplay and stuff for yourself. So I got to ask, before the reason you're here, is there a certain cosplay that you've done that's your absolute favorite?
My favorite one is also the one I just recently kind of re-updated. And I'm actually thinking I'm gonna try to, I don't know how I'm gonna do the mohawk for this one because her mohawk's long. But my favorite one is definitely my 90s animated X-Men Storm cosplay, the all white outfit, the white
Yes.
hair. I go and get like white out contacts. I can still see through them. They're a little bit tough to see through, but I get the wide out ones. But yeah, that one's my favorite. And now, especially with X-Men 97 coming to Disney Plus,
Yep.
they're going with that Mohawk style for her, but in that white outfit. So I'm like, okay, I'll figure something out before we get to the con season for me this summer.
That's absolutely awesome. Now, like you said, you had your grandma around that helped you get started in not just horror, but in film in general. But in order for you now to be, doing Chillyboy productions and being able to review any type of horror movie in general, horror had to start for you somewhere. So now, Larry, I would like to go back to the past and talk about what it was that got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie. And Larry, the first horror movie you watched was
Poltergeist. The iconic 80s Poltergeist.
one of the scariest PG movies you will ever see in your entire life.
Yeah. It's a good starter, I'd say. Because of that, it is PG, but if you're looking for an entryway into horror, it's a little bit tamer than a lot of modern day stuff. It gets a little creepier when you're like, oh, learn about the backstory and this poor young girl, and what happened with her life. A lot of the actual grave site. Like, I mean, there's a lot behind the scenes that actually make Poltergeist the film a little bit like creepier and more Halloween.
See, and I love the lore of the poltergeist curse and the lore that comes along with it. It really does enhance the fear of the movie. So, do you remember about how old you were the first time you had seen it?
So it was really interesting. I wasn't supposed to be watching it. So they rented it when I believe I was like 4 years old, and on the couch. They thought I had gone to sleep, like all, it was me, my grandma, my mom, and they thought I had fallen asleep, and I hadn't. And so I was like watching it at like 4 years old or so.
And the thing about this movie is, especially when you're that young, you have the little brother, the little sister that you can relate to. These are your
Yeah.
peers that you're watching on TV. This isn't a bunch of adults. You're watching Robbie, you're watching Carol Ann, and you can put yourself in that situation because you're a young kid yourself. And I feel like those type of movies really were scarier for us as kids. I go back to this. Um, the miniseries, where you're focused strictly around the children in the movie and how they're essentially the main characters, and
Yeah.
they really do carry these movies to a point. Um, so we know you were, quite young watching it with your mom and grandma, which kudos to mom and grandma for getting you started unintentionally. But do you remember which scene it was that affected you the most?
Yeah, it was definitely the scene it's near the end of the film, obviously the big climax. There's several scenes in the movie that like stuck in my brain a lot that were like just, those pivotal scenes of the movie that kind of everyone remembers are definitely the ones that stuck in my brain.
Uh
But the
huh.
one certainly is kind of when we're jumping back and forth between the mom and the son, and the full haunt is on. Basically, it starts with the breaking through the window with the the big tree branch coming through. The mom is
Yes.
like holding on for dear life on her bed as her bed is like shaking about. The clown, you talked about it. It was like a 1-2 punch that really got me off to not a great start with clowns young in life. It was Poltergeist and then the It miniseries, because that little clown toy in Poltergeist was scary. I was like, oh, whoa, this little clown is too much in this boy's bedroom. And then you have that weird, like, the ghost, the apparition that comes out of the closet, the big, like, white apparition that comes out.
Yes.
So it was just, yeah, it was like full on mania at that point in the movie. And that's really what kind of like stuck with me. I'd say probably the most, followed pretty closely by the like peeling of the like face, like the maggot face in the mirror. That's the that's like close number two that was seared in my head.
See, and it's funny because I remember watching two movies that really, really got to me that I saw on network TV. It was like Fox 36 on like a Saturday afternoon, was Poltergeist and Tourist Trap. Both of these movies I saw on television as a kid. And, I didn't expect them to be as scary as they were. I went into them like, oh, this movie's on Fox 36
Yeah.
Toledo. This isn't going to be scary. And I remember just being like, that shit was scary. And that face peeling is one that I remember. And it was just, well, how is this allowed to be on TV right now at my age? I was like, there's no way. This is insane. So, um,
Yeah.
well, we know which scenes affected you the most, and Poltergeist has an effect on you to be able to do that. But what would you say your favorite scene from the film is?
Yeah, I think, oh gosh, there's so many that are just great. Obviously, I would say probably I would say probably when they rescue the daughter, when they get her out, they're kind of like covered in the like
Slime.
slime. It's almost like a rebirth of sorts, but it's just a really, I don't know, it's a satisfying conclusion when they finally come out the other end and that connection between them. I always loved the medium in this movie as well. I've always thought she is just really fabulous and wonderful, like a really good character actress for this role. Um, so
Oh,
getting to that
Tangina.
so getting to that conclusion, I don't know. It's a really probably one of my favorite, like satisfying conclusions. I'm a sucker for a dark horror ending, a non-resolute, a pretty distraught horror ending now that I'm older. But when it comes to just like nice, satisfying, full story conclusion horror endings, I think Poltergeist has one of the best.
And I love how like you talk about like the ending, how everything happens. You have this huge climax, everything. Then they go to a motel, and the movie ends with the dad pushing the TV out of the motel room. Like we're
Yeah.
not gonna do that.
No,
We're
we're
not doing
done.
that shit
No,
anymore.
no, no more.
Um,
We're not putting you up against the TV no more. We're here. We don't want any messages from the beyond the screen, please.
Yep, that's a wrap for us.
Yeah.
Um, so again, a movie that I've said is very influential even today. You still have movies that are trying to do what Poltergeist did and failing on it at it miserably. But we did get a remake of Poltergeist. So I
Yeah.
do got to ask, did you see the remake? And if so, were you a fan of it?
I did see the remake, and I think I didn't hate it. I didn't think it was like terrible, but I don't know. There's just such a I think that's what's so hard with a lot of older horror movies when you remake them and you try to make them, like new school scary. It lost the charm of what the original had because again, yes, it's scary. It has those big scary moments, but it also is just a really good film, period. Like it's a really well made movie and it doesn't rely fully on just like scares and all of that.
Right.
And I think, this is one of those cases where the modernized version tried to push the scare part and lost the heart of what made the original as special as it is. So, not one of the worst. We've certainly had much worse horror remakes to me, but also not great.
And I feel like you feel. I feel like it was just forgettable. There
Yeah,
was
forget.
nothing about it that was special. One thing that I will say, Ashley and I did a deep dive on this movie when we were doing
Oh,
our versus episode of the original versus the remake.
okay.
And in production, the minute they started production, they were like, "Listen, Heather O'Rourke was Carol Ann. That's it. Period. We will
Yeah.
not be casting another Carol Ann." They changed the character's name to Maddie. They used a dark-haired, dark-eyed young lady for the role. They did the complete opposite of Carol Ann in her memory. They were like,
Yeah.
"That's Carol Ann as Heather. That's it. Period. This is our new person. We're changing it up. We're making her
Yeah.
her own. And they didn't even have the older sister in this movie because they were like,
Yeah.
that was her. We're not doing that. They lost their lives too early. We're not replacing them.
Mhm.
Those are cemented in history. And that, watching the
That's
behind the
yeah.
scenes, that really gave me a big respect for the filmmakers and what they were trying to do. But again, it doesn't help me remember how,
The
anything
movie
about the
itself.
movie. But so yeah, it is, and there are rumors now of another Poltergeist remake. They're talking about either it being a TV series or another film in the franchise. Is that something you would like to see, or is it kind of a like let a sleeping dog lie type of thing?
Um, yeah, I just kind of it's one of those that's really hard. I think the supernatural horror subgenre is one of the hardest, to be honest. Obviously, if you see behind me, I'm also a huge slasher fan. Slashers are my jam. And that one, if you hit the formula, you can really get it good. And if you miss the formula, a lot of times they're still pretty fun. Like it's like even a bad slasher is still kind of a fun slasher in most cases. But when it comes to these supernatural movies, and we always get them, we get an exorcism of this, a haunting of that, blah, blah, blah. Oh, most of them miss and they miss wide off the mark. And they're not
Yeah.
fun when they miss. They're just kind of like, oh God, like my favorite horror movie of all time, not necessarily my first, but my favorite is The Exorcist. And we saw how that goes. Like they keep trying. They are trying and trying and trying to recapture that first Exorcist magic. It right down to now a requel reboot series, and they fail every single time. They can never come up even close. And I
Mhm.
feel like one, it's always of the time. So I think Poltergeist, when it came out, was very much of an early 80s. And then with God, maybe there's something sick about me. Like, I don't know. I'm like, I have Exorcist and Poltergeist, both who had like insane behind the scenes like stuff happening and like terror stories behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So, so it is hard, and I appreciate filmmakers taking those steps to really respect these people, these real life people who are gone. But when it has all of that mythos and lore and tragedy surrounding it, on top of a very specific tone and atmosphere to it, it's just so hard to recapture. So maybe maybe no, I just don't know if there's enough material for a full series. I mean, you're gonna have to
Right.
really pad a lot into it to make it a series, and I don't know if I want them to do all that. And another movie, I feel like it'll probably be pretty similar to the last one,
That's
at best forgettable.
yeah. And that's where it becomes such a bummer because obviously way bigger than film. But you had Heather O'Rourke that had a medical misdiagnosis
Yeah.
that died during the filming of Poltergeist 3. And it's just such an unfortunate thing to happen to such a bright star
Oh,
at the time. Like she was really coming into her own and wanting to be a filmmaker, and it's just really a sad story. And um I personally love Poltergeist 3. It's my favorite in this franchise. I don't like the end. Uh, Obviously they had to just throw an ending on there because the studio was like, "Oh yeah, we don't care. Finish our movie."
yeah.
I don't even mind the body double thing. Like that doesn't bother me. What really bothers me is I feel like it's a huge slap in the face and extremely disrespectful that they had Reverend Kane laughing at the end with the lightning strike. It's like, you're not continuing this franchise. This young lady just lost her life. Wrap it up in a
Yeah.
good way. Give her a happy ending.
Yeah.
So that's the one part that really bothers me. Um, But I was going to ask, I had my little buddy Ghostface here, and he was going to ask you what your favorite scary movie was. But we now know that that is The Exorcist. Um,
Yes.
and it's the Exorcist is one of those movies that, while I think it's probably the scariest movie of all time, I think that nothing will ever touch it like that. It's a movie that, like you said, has been often duplicated but never replicated.
Yeah.
It's There are so many people that have tried to do it, and I'll be honest with you. I know it's a hot take. I didn't mind the new Exorcist movie. I didn't think it was. I didn't think it was bad. I put it right smack dab in the middle of that franchise. I think it's better than 4, 5, and 2, but I don't think anything will ever touch 1 or 3 to me. 3 is my personal favorite in that franchise.
And look,
I
you just love those thirds.
I did. It's funny. I don't like every single franchise, like Poltergeist
E-
3,
Even
Exorcist
Scream
3.
3?
I love Scream 3.
It's your favorite though?
No, not my
Oh,
favorite,
okay.
but
I
I
was
love
like,
it.
okay, that's a hot take too.
No, but see, here's what I will say, and I'm not going to go too much on a tangent on this because people that know the channel know I've talked about it a lot. I know people hate the voice changer in Scream 3. I know that they hate it, but could you imagine if they do a Scream 7, if they're able to finally do it and they get Gail back? The movie starts with Gail in like her in her weather studio, and we're taking some calls. We got a call for Gail, and it's Dewey's voice. Like, why didn't you save me, Gail? You could have been there for me, and then it slowly morphs into Ghostface, and then you get your Scream 7. Like, I
Yeah.
would love that. Like, bring that voice changer back. I know people hate it and people would be bummed, but I just think that'd be a really cool way to open the film on such a heartbreaking moment.
I think Scream 7 would be the time to do it, huh? Because I mean,
You've
I don't
already jumped the
know.
shark on this franchise now.
Spyglass has pretty much shot themselves in the foot at this point. So who cares? Just,
Right.
do whatever
At
for
this
Scream
point,
7.
just have some fun now. Um,
Yeah.
but The Exorcist is it's a movie that I think is just so special because the impact that it still has on us. I mean, it's 2024 and we're still talking about how this is people's favorite horror movie.
Yeah.
How I was blessed. My mom and dad owned a mom and pop video store growing up, downtown video. I had movies at my disposal all the time. This was the only movie my mom shut off. She was like, "Nope, we're not doing this. You're not finishing this." So it'll always have the stigma around it to me, being
Yeah.
the only movie my mom was ever like, "You can't watch this." So, Larry, I completely understand why you're such a fan of The Exorcist. It's
Especially
it's
if
a
you
movie
grow
that,
up. Yeah, if you grow up in a religious family, if your parents, your family is religious. My grandma told me stories because she did go to see it in the movie theater, but she walked out. It was the moment, like that first head turn, she was out and walked
yep,
out of the movie theater. It was too much. She was like, "Oh no, 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 no!" And and it was like I remember, we obviously, I would say probably the most comparable that you can think of is something like maybe the Blair Witch Project when that came out and the people's reaction leaving the theater. Possibly Paranormal Activity, I think also had like this really profound effect on people. But it's so hard to imagine this like cultural just moment when The Exorcist was released in the 1970s. People are seeing stuff like they've never seen on film before and are just like, leave. I gotta go. Like this is
yeah,
too much. And exiting the movie theater. But even when you watch it from, I think this is what I love is when you watch it even from a 2024 viewpoint, obviously a lot of views and societal things have changed. We're not as religious of a country by and large. So a lot of people they're not as scared of things like possessions like we once were. But just the filmmaking of The Exorcist holds up so well. The makeup work is still so good in this film. And you compare that to these newer ones that rely quite heavily on CG for so much of what they do, and then you go back and watch The Exorcist, and you're like, how is this holding up, from the 70s when something that came out in 2015 looks terrible right now?
right,
And what they do is really create a good drama to start in The Exorcist. And I know some people think it's a little bit slow, but I think that really helps the emotional impact of the second half that's much more horror. So we build up, we care about these characters, we care about this mother-daughter relationship. Um, so yeah, maybe I just like family horror movie, horror, just different spirits haunting families and this like parent-child relationship hidden in there.
it's funny because like you were talking earlier about possession horror movies, like those are my favorite. That's my favorite subgenre. I think it's because I did grow up in an extremely religious
Oh,
household, and my grandma was extremely religious. But those were the movies. Like I still to this day, people would be like Ouija board. I'm like, nah, I'm good. I'm straight.
I won't touch
I,
it either.
I get it. I get they sell it at Toys R Us, but I'm still good. I'm not interested. Um, but where another way I will 100% agree with you. I think that the best horror movies are a drama that is wrapped up in scariness. Like that's I don't mind a slow burn if you are giving me characters to give a shit about.
Yeah,
If you give me a 3 hour movie and I still don't give a shit if anybody lives or dies, you've done something wrong in my opinion.
yeah,
But if you have a 2 hour slow burn where I'm genuinely falling in love with these characters, the children, the parents, the priests, the Tangina, the
yeah,
people that are anybody, and I'm really building a relationship with these characters, then you're doing a slow burn right. Because if something were to happen to any of these characters, now I'm bummed. Like, oh,
yeah.
I love that person. Why did they have to fight it? Like that's the type of stuff that's what a slow burn is really at its best. So,
Yeah,
Larry,
totally
I've
agree.
had an amazing time talking to you about Poltergeist, The Exorcist, Scream 3, even everything in
It's
between.
Scream is right up there. It's my number two behind The Exorcist. It's the OG Scream. I'm a Scream diehard forever.
It changed the genre. I
Yeah.
mean, whether you love or hate it, again, something I've said 1,000 times, whether you love or hate it, you absolutely cannot deny the impact Scream had on the horror genre as a whole. The horror genre
Yeah.
would not be the same right now if it wasn't for Scream. And if you don't believe me,
No.
go back and look at the movies that came out in 93, 94, 95, and then the horror movies that came out in 97, 98, 99, and tell me Scream did not help to save the horror genre at a time where it was getting pretty wonky.
And it was like,
Um,
I don't know, for I'm a millennial, so it was kind of like the first horror icon that we kind of were able that we grew up on.
right.
We missed I missed. I'm a early 90s baby, so I missed the 80s icons, the 70s icons, and it was Ghostface who really was like my horror icon of
Right.
my lifetime. So it was cool, and he's still going. So, well, kind of. I don't know
Yeah.
if Spyglass doesn't completely sink the ship.
See, and I was just gonna say, like, Ghostface is one that he's on the Mount Rushmore for a lot of people.
No.
Like it's so amazing because it's always a different villain, but it's always the same villain. It doesn't
It's
matter who's under
just
that mask; it's still Ghostface at the end of the day.
it's for me it's probably at least out of the horror icons the most consistent. I know not everybody loves all six of them. I really like all six of them. I personally don't think there's a bad one in the bunch, including three. I like Scream 3 as well.
Me too.
But when you compare them to like the other horror franchises who have six plus movies, by movie six, they all have at least one, more than likely multiple. Like, oof, okay, we this is
Right.
rough. Exorcist 2, we're looking right at you. That was an
Yes.
immediate drop right off the cliff. With the Exorcist.
Oh boy.
But yeah, with Poltergeist, it was always just fun too because I had it was a friend of my grandma's, but if you're ever part of an extended family, I'm Latino, so it's we're not only have a huge family in and of ourselves, but then it's like anyone your parents or your grandparents grew up with are also your aunts and uncles. So I have just a ton of aunts and uncles that don't aren't even related to me.
I,
And one of
I get it.
them oh, it's always babysitting me, and she's passed away from now, but when I was growing up, she was around all the time. And my favorite. So not only was it my first horror movie, Poltergeist was like my first favorite movie. So
Right.
I wasn't rewatching, the Disney movies yet. I was rewatching Poltergeist as kids do. So, and she hated scary movies and she was really scared of Poltergeist, but it's all I would want to watch. So I would go to her house and I would make her turn it on. So it was like
That is
torture for her to babysit me because I always was watching Poltergeist.
that's amazing. I love that. and,
Yeah.
and it's we talk about you talk about being in a Hispanic family. Um, my aunt and uncle, because my mom worked two jobs. She was at the store, she was doing her thing. So my aunt and uncle essentially raised me, and my uncle Dave, he's Hispanic. So like I grew up, my grandpa Rudy was always guinea pigging us kids. Come here, mijo, try this. And we're trying all the
Yeah.
foods, and so I get it. Once you're in that family, you're in that family.
Yeah.
and so I'm glad to hear other people from different areas had that same walk of life essentially, because I
Yeah.
grew up very, very Hispanic, very Hispanic. So it's awesome to hear that the other I have so many aunts. My wife, it blows her mind. She's like, "How are you related to them?" I'm like, "Well, not really related, but that's Uncle Mike." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So well, man, again, I had an amazing time talking about your first horror movie and favorite horror movie. But before I let you go, I do want to bounce back to Poltergeist, and I think I know the answer, but I still got to ask anyway because my script tells me I got to ask. What we're gonna do is rank this movie on a skull count. Now, we're not ranking Poltergeist on acting, production, score, direction, nothing like that. We're not being critics. What we're doing here is strictly ranking this movie on how much it affected you on your first viewing. So 0 skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. Larry, what would you say your ranking of Poltergeist would be?
Yeah, just for the fact again that it did instantly become my favorite movie and was the seed. Before I met Pennywise, it was the seed that really kind of put those clowns, made me suspect of clowns off the bat for after Poltergeist. I have to go 5. Like being that young and seeing it and then choosing to watch it on loop like kids do, it's got to be a 5.
Yeah. I figured, but you never know unless you ask. So
Yeah.
I know I said it at the beginning, guys, but I have all of Larry's links down in the description. So please make sure you're subscribing. Please make sure you're following so you can become a part of that family and be in touch with everything that he has coming up in the future. Because we're going to try to get him back on here some more. We'd like to get him on here on a top 10 franchise ranking live episode so we can rock out with all of you guys live as well. So, Larry, please don't go anywhere. I have a couple more questions for you. Um, Everyone else, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. It does help to build the channel more than you know. And follow Sledgehammer Horror on social media. Our links are down in the description as well. But until next time, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.